Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Pause and Pivot for our Cafecito Chat space where we explore the science and soul of meaningful living through books, reflection, and shared conversation. And today we're diving into a book that has sparked an important global conversation around technology, mental health, attention, and human connection. And that's The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt. What happens when an entire generation grows up connected to everyone in the world, but increasingly disconnected from themselves, from each other, and from people sitting right besides them? If you can just picture it. So we're going to go exploring these ideas. And today, our three big ideas we're going to look at from the book. It's number one, how technology reshaped attention and emotional well-being, especially for kids at a certain age. Number two, why humans actually grow stronger through challenge and real world experiences. We'll dive into some of the nuances there. And number three, how we begin reclaiming presence, connection, and intentional living in a distracted world. So it's not about fear. It's about growing awareness about these social cultural norms and the beautiful technology that's arising with us, and how we can remember ways for us to plug back in to stay more fully human. So before we dive in, let's go ahead and connect with our co-hosts and check in. So hello, Gordon. Hello, Colin. So amazing to have you here today. And Gordon, can I go to you with just your first share? I know you're familiar with this book and the author. Would love to hear what your initial thoughts are.
Well, I'm so glad that this is being underlined. I recall last night, I was getting word from two of my nieces, one of whom was doing pole vaulting, and the other one was doing something equally dangerous. And I thought, oh my God, should they really be doing that? And after reminding myself of Jonathan Haidt's book and what he's saying, I'm thinking, this is exactly what they're supposed to be doing. They're supposed to be challenging themselves physically. And I was just talking to my neighbor this morning about the fact that as a species, we grew up, for millennia facing enormous challenges, and it's what made us so resilient. And now we're unwinding all of that to creating an incapability to deal with stress. So I think it's a fascinating topic right now.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. And it really dovetails into what we've always been saying is that, reading these books are amazing. They spark us into remembering something or an insight and reminding us that when we know better, we do better. So that's what I'm just so excited to dive in and excited to hear more about your familiarity with the topic. So, Colin, hello, welcome.
Hi.
What's your take on this book?
Honestly, as I contemplated some of the topics, I thought through the ideas of, I do have empathy for the generation that is dealing with what they're dealing with, but I also think sometimes of being a 60s kid and the fact that I'm alive right now. Because while emotionally and mentally they've been under great duress because of the technology, you look at the things that we lived with in those days. I think of the car seats that were just tubular steel that had hooks that hung on the bench seats, and we were part of the generation that got introduced to car seats. I mean, to seat belts and stuff. So it's a trade-off. In my opinion, the generation that we're talking about are physically safer than any generation prior to them. They were given more safety physically and more capacity for mental and emotional expansion, and it's going to mess with you. So I have empathy, but I also say, we had to go through both.
So true, right? And we appreciate all the different perspectives we bring to this space. The beauty of Pause and Pivot is to acknowledge that books may be written by a certain perspective, looking at a certain set of theories and research. And so we're here to just share the ideas and then bring our real lived experience to our discussion to really see where the information and the theory meets real life for each of us. So for all of you listeners, we just encourage you to, check out new books and see what insights might really pertain to your life, whether you're a coach, a teacher, a parent, definitely get the book. There's so much amazing research on what we need to know so we can go into the future with wiser decisions for our schools, workplaces, and the way we connect with each other. So with that, let's go ahead and dive into a little bit of background on the book and the author and an overview of the 3 ideas. So welcome to our brief introduction to this amazing book, The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt. The book really invites us to pause and reflect on what's been happening culturally over the last 10 to 15 years, and in particular, how the rise of smartphones, social media, and this constant connectivity may be shaping not only younger generations, but all of us. This is not just for Generation Z, but for all of us. So the book, The Anxious Generation from 2024 by Jonathan Haidt, how the great rewiring of childhood is causing an epidemic of mental illness. Now, a backstory of this is the author didn't intend to write a book on this topic. He was just looking into other research topics, and he was just finding so much amazing, very surprising, shocking information and research on the impact on kids born between 2010 and 2015, or kids that were going through their preteen and teen years, and how it impacted their mental illness. So just as a backdrop, he didn't write this book as intentionally, but as just in response to the research that he was uncovering. So we're looking at the impact and the rise of smartphones, and in particular iPhones, and how this impacted childhood, from play-based childhood to phone-based childhood. So getting an idea of what really was going on, if you're not a parent, if you didn't go through that at that time, and his highlight of the growing rise of anxiety and depression, not just here in the US, but he saw globally. So we'll look at the importance of attention as one of our most important things to focus on in today's lifestyle, and relationships, how this is becoming fragmented. So the focus in the book is this idea of the shift from play-based childhood to this idea of screenplay. So what he's really saying is there's a call towards more intentional living. He describes the major cultural shift, again, from play-based childhood to a phone-based childhood. And one of the deeper questions underneath all of this is, what happens when our attention is constantly interrupted? When face-to-face interaction decreases? When boredom disappears? And when so much of life moves online? You know, what I appreciate about the book is that it's not really about blame or looking for what caused this. It's just about, let's become aware. Because once we understand what's actually happening in all the different factors that contribute to our society, we can begin to make more intentional choices of the way forward. So Jonathan Haidt, he's an amazing researcher, a social psychologist, and best-selling author. His works explore this combination of morality, culture, well-being, and with a to insight into and curiosity of what helps people truly flourish. I just love his research. He's just going to no depth, to all depth, to really uncover what are the trends. You may already know him from some of his other books, The Happiness Hypothesis or The Coddling of the American Mind. And, you know, so in this book, his work is really compelling, and his research goes through a lot of different areas, including the psychology, some of the culture, and practical human concerns. And he puts it in a way that really feels very accessible. You can really tell that he's done a lot of research. He has a lot of charts in his book, and he just really makes it plain so we can all understand and digest it so we can receive the information. So in this book, he's really asking a larger question underneath the technology conversation. I believe he's really asking, what kind of humans are we becoming? So to learn more about Jonathan Haidt, you can reach him at his website, jonathanhaidt.com, and also at anxiousgeneration.com, where he has more supplemental information and updates on his research, and his Substack, After Babel. So his other books, as we mentioned, are The Righteous Mind, The Coddling of the American Mind, The Happiness Hypothesis, and his Substack, After Babel. So for today, the big ideas we're going to be focusing on explore the core themes of, in general, attention, the concept of resilience, and then connection. So first, it's the great rewiring, how technology reshaped attention, relationships, and emotional well-being, particularly for Gen Z. And then second, the idea that humans are naturally anti-fragile, especially kids. Meaning we actually grow through challenge, play, and real world experiences. We'll go into that more about embodied experiences. And third, how we begin reclaiming presence and true connection with more of an intentional way to live in a more and more distracted world. So I think that is so compelling and so applicable for our lifestyles today, where in a world where distractions abound, understanding attention and nurturing resilience and fostering connection, these are truly new pathways that are vital for us to navigate the complexities of modern life and mental well-being. So with that, let's go back and touch base with our co-hosts and see what we have going with our initial ideas.
Well, so the thing that comes up for me, Maggie, right away is as someone who's involved in meditation a lot, there's a lot of emphasis on reducing stress to zero. And I find it very helpful twice a day to really let go of all my stress and just be quiet. So I think the question that comes up for me is, what is the distinction between helpful stress that actually enhances growth and stress that is anxiety producing? And I'd almost rather just pose that as a question right now rather than speculate on answers. I have some thoughts, but I'd like to get your initial thoughts, the two of you, before I think about that, or just comment on that. So, but I'm really curious about that question right now.
Well, Gordon, I think that's beautiful, because as a lifetime meditator as well, anytime I see somebody talking about attention and all that stuff, it draws my attention. And you start to get into the psychology and what the great, like Jung has spoken about attention and the effect that it has. But at the end of the day, I feel like the three of us could have such cool conversation about this just based on what Maggie's introduced so far. But here's the thing that I've come to is that, and he points it out, humans are anti-fragile. And when I first started in meditation, I experienced some pretty profound peace, but it wasn't without tension. That's the thing I realized later is I had tension, but it didn't cause anxiety. And I think that's what we're headed to here. That's the place we're headed to, because in addition to our meditation experiences and stuff, for millennia, there have been prophets, seers pointing to this time frame as a time when there's going to be a massive shift of some kind. And I think we're tickling that right now.
Yeah. Gordon, I love your question, because you know what? I asked it the exact same question, and I was like, I don't understand this. When I was studying logotherapy, and I after having gone through yoga teacher training and meditation teacher training and Ayurveda lifestyle education, I came with this understanding that the highest goal, if you will, for humans is to come to that sense of calm and peace. Santosha. So a peace of mind of just not desiring, not avoiding. And so the calm, the inner stillness. And so through meditation, it's the letting go of all thoughts. And so the idea was that's the highest and ultimate aim of yoginis to live, right? That's the highest discernment of wisdom. And yet we have to remember that we tend to think dualistically, either or, stress is good, stress is bad, calm is good, energy is bad. And so when I started to study logotherapy and the idea of what Viktor Frankl shared, that he said, what man does not need tensionless existence. What we need is this tension that keeps us in our structure. And so in modern research, the idea is to, we want to challenge ourselves every day, but not every day where we stretch ourselves to breaking. So if you look at the rubber band, that's a perfect way to look at it. It's like too much tension and it's going to snap and it's going to hurt, right? But we want just a little bit, because that's kind of the joy of like, this is the safe of what we know, where we are, our embodied experience of our mind and body and all that we know and experience. And then a little bit out is our learning, our new experience of going to the playground and going along, one of those machines. And that creates a thrill and joy. And so it expands us, but it's not too much that it's, like you said, painful, hurting, or it doesn't serve at the level of our conscious awareness. So I think the relativity is key. And also what he points to is the right lesson at the right time. Imagine if our brains are 90% filled by the age we're 5, and he points that out with research, and the rest of the time for our development for the next 15 years or so, we have slow growth. And why is it slow growth? Because it's our brain is like looking to connect and make those cultural connections. So it's meaning making. It's trying to find mentors. It's trying to find what's safe, to discern what is healthy, what is building me, and what is not. And so he calls it the slow growth of that childhood period after 5 to 20, when the brain is more fully formed. And so that's my thing, is that I went from both. It's like, yeah, I was pursuing the calm and I want to reduce the stress. And now we're at the point where we understand where stress can be good. And he mentions about what does he call it? The tree in the biosphere. There was a important experiment when they were looking to look at the biosphere experiment in 1980 in the Arizona desert. Some of the trees failed and they fell over. And they said, oh my gosh, we realized that these trees need resistance. They need the push of the air to strengthen their roots so they'll grow into reaction wood. And so they'll actually be stronger and their roots will go deeper. So can we connect that to what do we as human beings that are evolving and changing throughout our different phases, and what is actually growing in those phases? So long answer, but like Colin said, we can take this for the whole hour.
Maggie, one thing I'd like to say in response to that, to take us back to the online phone stuff, is it strikes me that that medium is actually fabricating fear. It's all fear-based, either stimulating anxiety. Do I have enough of this? Are we in danger here? Is this happening? It's actually fabricated to heighten our fear responses. So we're actually living in a world of imagined fears, not the realistic thing of am I being tested by the winds of the desert, which are real. I'm actually being flooded by artificial fears about politics, about my peer groups, about the world. So that's the insidious thing about this work, is that it's really cultivating a kind of anxiety that's unrelated to what actually is what I need to confront in my day to grow.
This is a little bit on the esoteric side, and I'm not going to drive it too hard, but I can remember when I got my first cell phone and I started realizing that I could communicate with anybody, anywhere. And it took me back to my early meditation days when I was really exploring the esoteric world of telepathy, mental communication, spirit communication, stuff like that. And I wondered in my mind if it's not perhaps a way, what the technology is, because if everything is connected and everything is one, what if it's training us to believe that we should be in contact with everybody all the time, anytime we want? because I believe that now. It is not something that strains my imagination. Now, when I was prior to the digital economy, the idea that that was possible was only taught in there's a series of books called about the Himalayan masters that talked a lot about this. But as I started to, as I've been going through this, and now we got AI, I wondered if perhaps it's not expanding our imagination to allow for the fact that we have it. Now, you look at history, anytime new technology comes on board, it's not really that safe. When cars got invented, it was very common for people to have problems getting hurt and stuff. So I'm not saying it's easy or safe, but I am saying that it's stretching our capacity to contemplate that at any moment, what if I could just say in my mind, hey, Maggie, what's up? And you could come back to me. Now, that's really out there for this topic. I mean, for this cafecito, but I just have a sense that the technology is driving us into potentials that we actually have.
Well, that's a good thought.
So let's take a step back. And for those who aren't familiar with the term, the Great Rewiring, let me just set the context of what set this course for him to write this book, to show the amount of research between the years 2010 and 2015, and the teens that were going through puberty online, and the changes it made in the way they interacted, the way they were raised, and coincidentally what was happening socially, where parents were beginning to practice what's called safetyism. So without going into all the background on that, have you guys heard that term, safetyism? So safetyism came about, and he described it as, safetyism is when safety has become a sacred value. It turned into another, what he called, experience blocker. So the idea of the Great Rewiring is that at the time when these kids and preteens, the Gen Z, so the Gen Zs were born between 1995 and 2010. So when they entered their formative years of their preteen and teen years, and they were getting the first smartphones. The first smartphones didn't have front-facing cameras; they were flip phones, right? But as soon as they got the iPhone came out in June 2010, then the front-facing camera came out, and then right after that, the social media that use those selfie videos and phones were Facebook and Instagram, and then it just shot up like instantly. So that kind of brought in the focus online. Everything became online. And to your point, Gordon, at that same time, then there were researchers and authors, our beloved B.J. Fogg, who wrote about the habit loop. He went then on to write a book on, learning about psychology. And let me see. Oh, yeah. Persuasive technology. And so he was just telling people how to use technology to persuade those online. And then Nir Ayal wrote Hooked, How to Build Habit Forming Products, which is like giving the recipe to the technology leaders to work with psychology, to work how the brain works and hook those formative brains as they were forming. And at the same time, the parents were the number one focus, the number one idea that I took from this book was that Jonathan Haidt was saying during this period, two errors were happening. And it's just good for us to be aware of. Number one is the Great Rewiring was happening. Number two, safetyism. Parents were overprotective in real life and underprotective in virtual world. Because let's face it, like Colin said, when the seatbelt was invented, before that we didn't know, but then it was invented, and then there were guardrails. Lives were saved. We're in that new post iPhone where now we know the hazards. Now we know how it's changed the brain, changed the social norms for this generation. And he shares so much research. Get the book for all of the amazing tables and charts that he shares from all of his research, showing decidedly, markedly, 2010, the sharp rise for girls, more particularly, 150% rise in anxiety and depression. For boys, a little bit slightly under. And he goes into the explanation of the psychological reasons why girls were impacted more than boys and how boys are being impacted differently. So there's so much to really dive in. But the first idea is the great rewiring. For us as a nation, as a world, to understand that as these technologies do get introduced, we now have this moral necessity, a duty to say, now that we've learned there are hazards in things like the iPhone, and now with AI coming up, how can we now bring our higher level of awareness and intelligence to maybe preemptively put in some guard rails so we can anticipate some of these negative externalities that are impacting the vulnerable population, such as the kids. So let me pause there and see if you have any comments.
Just what a great question that is. I love that you're putting that question out because that is the challenge. And I think it's the challenge of every parent who's got a kid in that age group. And I was just talking to my neighbor about her 6-year-old, and I said, well, does she have problems with getting on the phone? In fact, I was talking about this. We're going to be doing this today. She says, oh, no, they're not. There's no access to, in fact, she hardly watches TV. So they're cultivating the preparation of being, having a normal childhood.
Yeah.
And so, and this kid was doing climbing in the mountains near where we live and jumping on this big trampoline kind of thing. It's like she was kind of like living a real life, a kid life, a play life.
I love it. I love it. I love it. So one of the quotes he puts in there, Jonathan Haidt, he shares, "We are forever elsewhere."
Mm.
And that really can speak to what we see with kids. They're on their phone and they're surrounded by their friends, but they're elsewhere. And us too, and he does point that there are impacts to the other generations, the millennials, lesser so, Generation X, almost no impact, and baby boomers, hardly any. So it's important to understand that the impact has been significantly different on these generations. And so for us who maybe think it's not a big deal, maybe we were not as impacted because our brains are already more fully formed. Our social norms, the way we identify and connect in our work and school were already formed. So to really look with great compassion at what this generation is going to have to deal with. And he did note that there was a significant rise in college students in mental illnesses beginning with 2012, a sharp rise, which coincided to when Gen Zs entered college. So my friends, we need to be following this group and understand the impact of their brain, the impact of the culture, the way in which they live and work and relate is different, and how we can cease this from continuing to happen. So he says maybe it hasn't even stopped. The Gen Z hasn't stopped if these same impacts are there to continue to form the brains of our kids. And he gives, not to make all gloom and doom here, he does share in the later parts of the book some ways for us to live with more intentional ways. And guess what? He offers 6 pathways or practices that are based on more of ancient wisdom, spiritual traditions and guidelines. Why? Because it's about what really matters. The traditions, the culture, the connection, the identity, the awareness. So with that, oh my gosh, this is an amazing book, and I just appreciate all your questions. The second idea we were going to talk about today is this idea that, humans are in fact anti-fragile. Woo! One of my favorite books, right? It's been inspired. We've talked about it in different areas based on this book. You can't even see it, but it's Anti-Fragile. The book is Anti-Fragile by Nassim Nicholas Taleb. And so Jonathan quotes his most famous quote about this, and it is that you want to be the fire and wish for the wind. And this may be something, have you heard of this, Gordon? Have you guys heard about this quote, this idea?
No.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so let's go into idea number 2. Let's go into that one and share. Okay, so the big idea number 2 is looking at one of the most hopeful ideas in the book around the concept of anti-fragility that was put forth by the author Nassim Nicholas Taleb in his great book, Anti-Fragile. And this is really looking at going back to why real life challenges in real person play and real world experiences help us grow stronger. So we grow through engagement in life, through being embodied, through free play, through exploring and trying things, understanding that we build resilience through actual conflict and challenges and those scraped knees, and different ways of expressing ourselves with our friends as we're trying to connect with others. So the idea and focus on overprotection that was happening in this same time with safetyism, how taking away the uncertainty, the lack of challenge, or the scrapes and the hurt feelings, how all of those really diminished the capacity of kids to grow and become resilient. So he really goes into honoring for us to really focus that it's being able to experience discomfort actually strengthens us. So in an overprotected real world, an unprotected online world, this is what has led to this generation that was rewired. So it's a really powerful insight because we want to look at where does resilience really live and how does it really get built? Not through the comfort, not through the convenience, not through paving the whole world so we are not, stepping on any rough stones. It's really built through developing capacity. So he provides a lot of different applications to encourage and allow the youth to encourage their exploration, ways to foster, safe independence, support risk-taking, empathize, this adaptability, and then to really have an eye on the whole person and well-being. And the quote from Nassim Taleb is, "You want to be the fire and wish for the wind." And Nassim describes it as, we can treat our kids or ourselves as fragile, like a champagne glass that we need to pad before we can put in the box and then put a label of treat with care, I'm fragile, on the outside. Or we can be resilient and be like a plastic cup. You may not need to cover it with bubble wrap. You just throw it in the box and it's okay if it gets jostled around. But he notes that it doesn't necessarily get stronger. But to be anti-fragile is something altogether different. It's the actual resistance, the challenge, the lessons learned that actually grow and build that anti-fragility. And so it's more like the flame, that a small candle might be snuffed out by a big gust of wind, but it is that same small candle that can burn and blaze into a mighty fire. So we can be, extinguished by that wind, or we can be fueled by it to grow in our brightness. So that's the concept of anti-fragility. And that is a challenge for us to step in and be a part of that, recognizing where we have control, to grow our capacity, to acknowledge our strengths, and then to be okay with the discomfort. And not only that, to say, bring it on. Bring on that challenge. Because yes, I know it's going to hurt. Maybe when we're kids, we're scraping our knees, or we're not invited to play that dodgeball. We're hurt. And yet we grow from that. As adults, what does that look like for us, right? And that when we learn that the little bit of a pain by stretching ourselves may hurt, but we'll never go back to our original structure, we will be expanded into another degree of our capacity. So anti-fragile. Imagining that for our kids, reducing the idea of safetyism as the highest value, recognizing what we need for resilient kids, for resilient future, is for us to be okay with the with the challenges and the discomforts, because that is the pathway towards, what did he say? The reaction would.
Mm. You know, it's this whole notion of fragile is getting my attention right now. And we have a bird nest that landed on. We were gone for the winter, and we came back, and there was a mother bird sitting in a nest on our door because we had a wreath there. And the fragility, she's got these little eggs, and all it would take is me jostling the door or coming, or abruptly doing it, and they could all die, and she would just disappear, and it could all happen. So the sense of fragility of nature is there, and I'm just acutely aware of my own feeling of the fragility of this. And yet today, the first of the little chicks was born. And so I haven't actually seen it, but my wife saw this little thing, and it's like she's out. I mean, she's like the mother hangs out there. She'll take off if something goes on, but she's hovering around and checking stuff out. She comes back. This is just a mix of nature for her, I notice my projection of this huge fragility and wanting to protect, and I feel like a culprit in this right now. So,
And yeah, and understandably so. We're hardwired to protect, right? But just looking around and seeing how things actually grow and what actually helps them with a curious mind can really open us up to honor, to let them individuate. Yeah. Well, I hope the baby chickie is okay.
I'm hoping.
Listen, my mind is going 50,000 miles an hour in 20 different directions right now because these ideas are exactly what I'm into and what I write about on Substack in my oneness awareness. Because what I'm coming to the realization of is that, and Gordon, I'll be interested to hear what you say about meditation. But when I found meditation and I went into that deep body experience of just everything's blissful and joyful and what I took as peace, I didn't value this tension that we get by being in the world of matter. And now I'm starting to shift completely into I want to develop the capacity to be coherent in greater complexity. And I really believe that that's what's happening here. But it's violent. It's actually violent. It is causing mental illness, death. There are people killing deaths of despair. If you've heard that term, there are more people killing themselves through alcohol, drugs, and suicide than ever before in the history of the world. Now, part of this idea of safetyism, as soon as I heard that, I was like, isn't that ironic that we humans, destined to die the minute we were born, are focused on our safety? We're like, oh man, I'm going to stay safe and then die. Now, I used to jokingly tease people like, you're going to die. Just face it. Get in there. Maggie, as soon as you started talking about that and the fragility, anti-fragility, I'm like, I remember the story of how you met Jim. Completely safe in LA. And what does she do? She goes to Mount Rainier in the freaking wintertime and decides she's going to go climb it. I'm like, who does this? Or else you look at football. Football is the number one sport in America. Completely safe, physically perfect specimen humans bash into each other 100 miles an hour, knowing that they could potentially have severe injury. Why do we do this stuff? Because at our nature, in our deepest nature, we are anti-fragile. We are like, I'm going to get down on this earth. I'm going to try stuff out and I'm going to see what happens. And I don't know, these concepts are just opening little doorways for me so much that you're going to have to work to keep me quiet today. I'm sorry.
I love it. No, what you said is so cool. It's recognizing again what's happening. Let's go back out and look at the big picture. Again, we're on the highway of life, and there are many signposts that are readily available for us to exit on predetermined stops. When we go to high school for 4 years, we get off, then we come back on, then we go to college maybe. And for most of us, a lot of us, we go to college maybe, and then we get married, we have a career. And at a certain point, the signs stop. And what's happening now is they're going in all different directions. And some people are even getting hovercrafts, so they're not even in a car. So it's just a completely new way to look at how we're traveling through life, through the phases of life, and how the technology is really changing how we are living alongside it. No longer is just a tool. And so who are we in the becoming? And like you said, we get to a certain point in life where we've done it all. We're strong, we're confident, and now there's no more challenge. So what do? We sign up for a Spartan's race. We sign up to go climb Mount Rainier, and it may not be consciously. I'm not doing that to be in an unsafe place, but something in me, the yearning, is saying I'm ready to go to my next level. There's something I need to expand into. And I think that the more we can become intuitively connected to who we are in our becoming, it pulls us in those directions of our next level of growth and learning. And so I think for me, travel is one of those things that does it. Like just going to Spain was like, that was super fun and stressful. And coming back, I felt so like proud of myself. Like, wow, I made that a really amazing experience. And I was really kind of nervous and anxious a lot of the time because of all the uncertainty. So how can we more and more, like Colin said, connect with the stillness while the rest is like this huge uncertainty and moving pieces, and we're still there in that calm?
As you're speaking, Maggie, I'm reminded of the book that we read about a month ago by Stephen Cope about the nature of Dharma. And it strikes me that, Arjuna in that famous work of the Bhagavad Gita is being prepared to go to battle. And what gives us the resilience ultimately is a sense of purpose, that we're here and we have a clear sense of where we're going and that it matters. And these are fights we're willing to fight. And so there is a piece that's kind of adjacent to what we're talking about, but I think is really important, is to what degree are our families and our upbringings preparing us to have a clear sense of what are the fights we really want to make that have a purpose to fight for what it is we want to fight for. So actually, it's interesting that Jonathan Haidt initially wrote this book, The Righteous Mind, about the need for a moral orientation. He very much is about an ethical orientation missing in our education. In some ways, if there's a gap in that, so that there isn't a sense of where we're going as humans in terms of our own evolving toward our becoming, then we're prey to machines like the iPhone.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to underscore that because that strikes me to be a real crux of the issue.
Love that point, Gordon. But Maggie, I mean, I know logotherapy is a key component, but if you think about Viktor Frankl's experience and the duress he got put under, his approach to man's search for meaning and the three methods you find meaning, and the one that I related to so much is inescapable suffering. You get put into a moment of inescapable suffering, and there are one or two things that's going to happen, and that's happening. This book is about people who are collapsing under the inescapable pressure of the expansion of complexity in our world. There are people crushing, but there are people who are in that same pressure are finding deep meaning and expansion of their own capacity. And I think that that's exactly what we're going through. There's a lot of humans. There's a lot of writings about the period from 2025 to 2027. You can go to Alice Bailey, Ra Uru Hu, the guy that created the. Anyway, there's a whole bunch of people that have pointed to 2025 to 2027 as this real defining period. And in my opinion, this is exactly what it's the essence of logotherapy, in my opinion, what we're dealing with, what we're facing. And I think that this book has so much potential to help people understand a little bit more as to what we're experiencing.
Yes, love that. And to go back to what Gordon was saying, Jonathan Haidt did mention two different modes that are critical to defining sort of a person's default setting.
Mhm.
So nature versus nurture, right? Who are we and how is life molding us? He says that it's called a defend mode and a discover mode. So the BIS is behavioral inhibition system, and that turns on when there are threats. So we might liken that to the stress response, right? then the BAS is the behavioral activation system, and this turns on when there are recognized opportunities. So this is interesting what he says. So in nature, and we are different from nature, like animals. So a deer's default is the defend mode. It's always on the lookout. It's ready to be eaten, right? The predator or a top mammal is going to be mostly in discover mode because their beingness is about eating others, dominating. And so the question is, for the great rewiring, this generation is mostly their default setting is in the defend mode. And so this is a major contribution to their individual personality
Mm.
and the way in which they
That's
will walk through the world.
that's amazing. That's an amazing insight, because if you think about it, there's been so much written on with the advent of AI that so many people have talked about, oh, people are going to lose their jobs, blah, blah, blah. I've been reading articles that say there will be more self-made entrepreneurial millionaires in the next 5 to 10 years than ever before in the history of the world. And it gets back to that BIS versus BAS right there. You can sit back and think, oh my God, everything's stressing me out. And I'm not minimizing that, because there are people literally losing their capacity to function. But for those who take that apex approach to life is meant to be lived, oh my God, there's so much opportunity.
Yeah.
Colin, as you're hitting that point and coming back to this complexity piece, I keep thinking about. I'm also aware of the need for policies that actually allow everyone to participate in that, because I think the growing inequality in our country, there are people who are being dropped every day by the capacity to deal with the level of complexity. And even as an older person as I am, I'm more aware of the complexity of even the challenges that I'm taking on. And so I'm kind of more empathy for that right now, I think, at this point. So I think there's a huge need to really prioritize the development of humans, not just the humans that are at this level of preparation and privilege, but so much more. And I'm somehow feeling a concern about that group, that population.
Well, that's a great segue to our third idea where, Jonathan Haidt leads us back to reclaiming human connection. It's moving from a fragmentation in our community towards presence and intentional living. This is really, he shifts in the whole latter part of the book towards hope and action. Because if attention has become fragmented, then maybe one of the most important things we can reclaim is this idea of how we show up with full presence. The elements of connection require this idea of real conversations like in real person, in real life, with real people, having an experience of real moments of both stillness and experiences and connections. So I think this becomes especially important now in this era of AI and the accelerated growth in technology and how work is being redefined, how AI is growing alongside the formation of new ways to work. So as we're looking for ways for us to practice more of this presence, his question really is, how do we stay more fully human? Some ways he recommends are digital detox to protect our attention, ways to look for mindful and meaningful gatherings, right? To cultivate those meaningful and purposeful relationships, creating those intentional interactions, and creating lives that feel grounded and intentional. So often it begins surprisingly with just small daily choices, like putting your phones away during dinner, or going on a trip to have a wonderful experience with a friend. So in the end, Jonathan Haidt does want to paint the picture that the Great Rewiring devastated the social lives of Gen Z by connecting them to everyone in the world and disconnecting them from the people around them. So that's the big idea, is that there is hope, and especially repeating that once we know better, we can do better. We can make better decisions as we become more inclusive and who is involved in reshaping where we go from here. So what comes up for you in this idea? You excited about the future of technology, where we're at with our own growth potential?
Well, as you read this list, I just started thinking about a conference that I've been helping to prepare for. It's called uh, uh, from the Graduate School Alliance for Education and Coaching, and we're calling it a gathering. And this is going to be a gathering. It's the art of gathering. There's a book about the art of gathering, which is a book we might want to put on here. It's really an incredible kind of segue from this. We have to be very intentional about how we gather. But instead of having the regular kind of conference where people just get up and do their show, which you can do online, this is about actually gathering, finding the conversations and the meetings. Like actually, Maggie, you and I met in a gathering spontaneously at a conference, not somebody that was presenting a presentation that we were both attending. So
You were getting coffee. I was sitting down in a hotel and you were walking
exactly.
by.
I remember that moment exactly so. And then we struck up a conversation. So this is about the art of gathering. It's going to be all in person. So it's detoxing the digital. Mindful gathering is the whole purpose. Intentional interaction and community engagement. It's about how do we bring the community of people in the world of coaching together to look at what is our purpose and what is our mission here to address these kind of concerns that we're talking about. So it just really Jonathan Haidt has a way of just hitting to me the center point of what needs to be done. And so I love that. And focusing on presence, to me, that is so critical because it's like that's the thing that I notice if I'm struggling to be present, I'm not there. Something's taking me away.
Yeah.
And boy, when it's a phone and somebody I really want to talk to is on her phone or his phone, it's like, what? Get off of that. I want you to be here with me right now. So it is about presence and insisting on that with each other when we're sitting in the same room, when we're gathering together, when we're on the bus going to school, whatever it is, these kids are interacting. So I love that hopeful point. Thank you for bringing that in.
Maggie, so Gordon, everything you just described, in my opinion, is critical for the next stages of life. But and this is keeping a little bit of the digital in mind. But as you went down those bullet points on that on your presentation, all I could hear in my mind is, "Oh, that's pause and pivot. Oh, that's pause and pivot. Oh, that's pause and pivot." I was like, "Oh my God, Maggie! Like you are literally being an activist in the hope channel that Haidt laid out. This is what we're doing right here. Almost every one of those, other than the face to face. So from my perspective, yes, there's going to come a time I'm looking forward to, where you, me, Gordon, Urchina, we sit down, have a cup of coffee together or hang out and just chill and do get the time to spend hours and hours just mulling through all these ideas. But for now, I'll take this. I'll take this every Thursday.
Yeah.
Thank you both for sharing that enthusiasm, the love, the energy, and he does point to the four foundational harms that we want to clarify: the social deprivation, the sleep deprivation, the attention fragmentation and the addiction that is coming out from this generation, the great rewiring. And then as he points us now to the hope and what we can rebuild, I love how he's really focusing on these concepts that have been emerging for the past decade or so in lifestyle medicine and positive psychology fields, of the need for the basics, return to basics, right? Face-to-face interaction, social connection, the sleep, outdoor activity, and then reducing that constant stimulation is a forefront for our discussions today. But really it's about this real world engagement. How to be really engaged in the world together. It's just going to add that next layer of feeling more fully human. And really, as AI is birthing itself into the way that we are creating our next generation of societies, the number one theme I am seeing is about awareness. And right behind that is sort of a sense of duty of how we're going to show up in our energy, the sort of impact and ripple that we're going to have. And the idea, I think it was Thich Nhat Hanh who said, we can't expect to carpet the world with leather to protect us. It's just cover your foot so you protect yourself walking among the world, or something like that. So the idea is to move away from that idea of safetyism and, reducing stress or eliminating hazards, to saying those are some of the things that bring the colors and the vibrancy and the sacredness of feeling like we're fully alive. And so to hop in and leap with joy, spend more time with joy, let us just cover our feet and dive in fully.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. That is exactly what I feel is needed.
Awesome. I know you've got to get going, Gordon, so we're going to wrap up. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your reflections and your shares, as always.
Thank you.
Thank you. See you next time, Gordon.
Get out.
Okay, well, as we wrap up, thank you so much for being here. It's been an amazing discussion on the anxious generation by Jonathan Haidt. We've been reviewing some of the big ideas. So just reviewing some of the big ideas from The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt is to really just look at with great compassion, Gen Z and the great rewiring of this generation. Understanding, number one, really the focus on protecting awareness and attention. Number two, sort of refocusing different ways on how we can build emotional resilience for ourselves and our communities. And number three, reclaiming that sort of real human connection. Because Jonathan Haidt says, in a world dominated by distraction, we must prioritize attention, resilience, and nurturing that meaningful connections, just like we're doing here today, to cultivate a more fulfilling and enriched existence. So that, my friend, is the end of this beautiful review of The Anxious Generation. Again, we hope that you get a copy of it. And if you download the QR code, you can get a quick snap 6-page overview of the philosopher's note on this amazing book. So let's go back to you. Colin, would love to hear your reflections, anything sticking with you that you'd love to help us close with.
Well, I think from my perspective, this is a timely conversation. You made mention that he points to the ancient wisdom teachers as, these are ways you can protect your attention. These are ways you can maintain your resilience. These are ways you can come through this fire that we're going through right now. And I don't think that's a coincidence. I don't think it's a coincidence that the very thing that has been taught for millennia, stillness, focused attention, presence, acknowledging the spiritual side of life. It's not a surprise to me that a man writes a book and says, these are the challenges facing this generation. And oh, by the way, look to the ancient wisdom to get through it.
Thank you for, okay, I just have to share it now. So, again, from his amazing thing, in one of the latter chapters, he does offer spiritual practices. So he offers 6 of them. Number 1 is shared sacredness, right? Number 2 is embodiment. So not being on our screens all the time, but
Being
in real
present.
life.
Yep.
Feeling also, right? Embodiment. Number 3, stillness, silence, and focus. So for us, it's the return to center, right?
Yep.
Number 4, transcending the self. So being a part of something bigger than us.
Yeah.
Instead of the selfie, just the selfie. Selfies are awesome and beautiful and fun. And let's transcend the self. Number 5, be slow to anger, quick to forgive. And that ties to a lot of how girls became more bullies, more bullies online, and boys turned to different kinds of there was failure to launch, and there was another term I wanted to share with you, and the last one I want to share is number 6: find awe in nature as the number 1 way, because that's embodiment. It can be community. It's just beautiful. So those 6. I did want to share this one thing though. It's not all just about girls, how girls were more disproportionately impacted. The quality and the ways in which boys were also impacted is central in one of these chapters. So get the book for anybody who wants to dive more into that. But 2 really cool new terms that I've never heard of. One was called NEET, N-E-E-T, an acronym. And this was in the UK. A study that was done in boys between ages of 16 and 24, and it was NEET stood for they're not in education, employment, or training. They were said to be economically inactive. So this is sort of like the failure to launch. But the other one, young people were called. It was mostly for youth in Japan. But then it became predominant in other communities, and this term was called hikikomori, 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 a Japanese term that means pulling inward. And it was these boys lived like hermits, emerging from their caves mostly at odd hours, just when people weren't around, just to eat or go to the bathroom. They were less competent in the outside world, and this fueled their anxiety about the outside world. They were kind of trapped.
Wow.
Hikikomori. So it's not just in Japan, it's in different areas. So,
oh, there she is.
Yeah. Hi, Archana. Welcome. We're just about to wrap up. We just wanted to think this is an amazing book. So, The Anxious Generation. But thank you for joining us. It's always good to see you.
Thank you. Sorry for not being present. It's been time is out of joint for me, but it is an incredible book. So thank you. Sorry for missing it.
It's always great to have you with us, even for just a few minutes.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here. I know you've been on the go, and we've had a really rich discussion. Gordon was just with us, and we definitely love this book. Join us next week for this next book. We're going to look at Brain Energy by Christopher Palmer. I'm just halfway through it. It's going to be a great segue to look at some of the concepts from the anxious generation. We're going to tie it into kind of the mind-brain connection, and how metabolism is such a key new term when we're thinking about mental illness, mental wellness. So for that, my friends, join us next week. And thank you so much for being part of today's Cafecito Chat. And if this conversation resonated with you, we invite you to subscribe, share, and join us for future discussions as we continue exploring books and ideas that help us live more intentionally and fully. And of course, if you're a parent, educator, or coach, or anyone supporting younger generations, this is an absolute book worth reading and discussing together. So until next time, my friends, take a moment to pause. Not to stop, but to pivot toward what matters. Thanks so much for joining. Until next time, be well.